Hăīre, φίλε, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 5, verses 30 through 31. But first, last time in John chapter 5. Here is our rubric, everything we go through. Let's begin. U dunamai ego poien ap emautu uden, kathos akuo krino, kai he krisis he eme dikaia estin, hoti u zeto to thelema to emon, ala to thelema tu pimpsantos me. Eon ego marturo peri emautu, he marturia mu uk estin alethes. There we have that. Taking a look at the beginning of our verse, we have a negative immediately followed by a verb. That's quite nice. This is a deponent, so what we see here is the first principal part. That's in the first person singular present tense. As I said, it is deponent and it is indicative. And it means to be able to do something. So we have dunamis, I think is the noun, which means power, strength, ability. Ego, the redundant pronoun, so then we have emphasis here, and then poiein, epsilon, iota nu, there's that circumflex telling us that we have a contract. This is from poieo, so it's epsilon contract to do. Dunamai takes an infinitive, normally in order to do another infinitive or some accusative. In this case we have, break in thought. I'm not sure where this is actually going to connect up, but we have uden as the object of poien, that is, the epsilon nu here is from eis mia hen for the word one, so not one, not anything, and it's neuter form, so accusative, singular, neuter. And then we have a prepositional phrase, op emautu, missing an omicron there because it elided due to the epsilon. Apo plus the genitive, and this reflexive pronoun is representing to us origin. So genitive, singular, masculine, origin. I am not myself able to do anything, or I'm not able to do nothing. It would be the direct translation, but then we get a double negative in English, which does not exist in the Greek. And then apo emautu would mean from myself, or originating from myself. So the power must come from somewhere else. Moving on to the next clause, kathos, just as is how we translate this. This is an adverb. Omega sigma right there should tell us that it is an adverb. Sometimes, though, we have the nominative singular participial ending with that, but kath should be relatively familiar. Akuo, first principal part of another verb, which is always nice to shorten into, so you don't need to parse that. It's essentially the same, except active rather than deponent. And then we have yet another first principal part with krino. No need to parse. This one means to hear. This one means to judge. And kathos is linking these two together. I know it's not between the two, but that's how sometimes adverbs can work. Kai, he, krises, he, right there, that eta with the aspiration tells us we have the nominative singular subject, and krisis is feminine due to the article indicating the gender for us. And then he, eme, is the possessive pronoun. This is, I believe, an attributive position. I so rarely think about attributive versus the other ways that adjectives work that as with everything, it seems, I forget. But MA matching the case, the number, and the gender of the thing owned, and the article repeated so that we don't take it as a, what would it be, a predicate sentence. And the krisis judgment is mine, is how we would read that without the article, possibly a way that we could read it without the article, or we would want the MA between the two, I think. But instead we have dikaia, I should probably write that down, nominative, singular, feminine, referring back to that. Dikaia, alpha, right there, for the nominative, singular, feminine again. And then we have estin, the verb, seen it enough times, should be relatively familiar to everyone, so we don't need to parse it, just first person singular, present active, indicative, linking dikaia as the predicate to krisis eme. Moving on, hoti for that, because u negative with zeto, the verb, Note we have circumflex over the omega, not the omicron. And that tells us we have a contract again, and in this case it is zetao, no, not zetao, zetao, epsilon contract, just as with poiein. Omega eats, if you will, the epsilon, and the acute can no longer be acute over a long vowel like this. So it must become circumflex. It also can't move over because technically there are 3 vowels in this, even though only 2 of them are spoken or even written. The no, that doesn't make any sense. That did not explain that. Skip this part if you already know about how accents work. I'm going to try to explain that in English. Accents, again, as much a refresher of my own memory as for those of you who don't remember how this works. In nouns, accents stay on the syllable where we find them in the nominative form, and only move if the quantity of a vowel pulls it in one direction, and that's generally towards the end. Whereas in verbs, a accent will move as far over to the left as possible unless there is a long vowel pulling it the other direction. So with zeteo, we have the 3 different syllables until the contraction happens here. So the accent wants to be here, but it can't be because omega is a long vowel, and that pulls it more towards the end. And this all has to do with how the verb is spoken. So then it ends up on the epsilon. But the epsilon is subsumed into the omega, so that they become a single sound together. Really, the epsilon just vanishes, and they're spoken together. There are times, especially in older Greek literature, where you will find that a contract verb doesn't contract. But the big thing about contract verbs is this connecting vowel at the end determines how the other principal parts form. So when you see an eta in something, then that generally tells you have some sort of contract verb in the present tense. But anyway, so the vowel is currently on the epsilon, but the omega assumes the epsilon into itself, and the accent can't move further to the left, even though there are now only 2 vowels, 2 syllables, period. It has stuck where it is because the omega is now 2 syllables together as one, and acutes can't exist normally on a long syllable so that it turns into a circumflex. Back to the translation. Zeto means to seek, and then we have to thelema as the object of seek. To tells us thelema is neuter, which its form here should have done. Anyway, thelematos, so it's a atos noun for accusative singular neuter. And note we've got another accusative neuter article and emon, so we have 2 different forms of emon, both owning the thing before them, both in the same construction, which is very nice of John to do that for us. So my matching its noun. And then Allah introduces a new clause, to thelema. We don't need to parse this, except that now I believe it becomes the subject. So you have I do not seek my will, but still the object because we're assuming zeto again in this clause. I'm going to write that in as a reminder so that I don't forget. I assume you'll be fine. To thelema, tu, omicron, upsilon in the article, genitive singular, and then we get pimpsantos. Note the stem change there and the new tau marker for a participial ending. Omicron sigma off of this type of participial ending is a 3rd declension, matching the article for genitive singular. Genitive singular masculine because we know about whom he is speaking from the context of everything that's come before. His father. Aorist tense because it's off the aorist stem. Futures don't have participles. Active participle. The will of the one having sent me as the direct object. Finally, into verse 31, we have a conditional here, aeon, so we should be looking for funkiness, if you will, with the verbs. Taking a look at marturo, we've got another circumflex, which means we've got another contract. Again, it is an epsilon contract, epsilon omega, same thing happens as we've already discussed, or you skipped, which was wise of you to do. Prepositional phrase, this is indicative. Make sure to note that, otherwise, same as the verbs that we've seen before. Should have probably marked that up there. Peri anautu, this one with the genitive, this prepositional phrase means about or concerning, singular, masculine. So concerning myself. If I do, in fact, so since we have a indicative verb in the present, then this is speaking about a definite reality. So if I do, in fact, witness about myself, he martyria, he telling us subject, that is not an S. Here we go. Subject, mu owning martyria. So we've got a different type of possession here, which is pretty cool. Referring back to martyria, so it doesn't have to match case, number, and gender. It's just a normal pronoun rather than the adjectival possessor, or whatever the appropriate term is that I never bothered to learn. My witness, uk estin alethes, eta sigma. This adjective is the, what is it? It's s, so the neuter would be epsilon sigma. Ace is the same for both masculine and feminine, so this is a dual termination or double termination adjective. Going with martyria, nominative singular, not masculine, feminine. Estin, we've already seen too many times, don't need to parse that. But since we both have a indicative here and an indicative in the first clause, I forget if that's the apodosis or the prodosis, something I need to refresh on. Look at everything. This tells us that the type of conditional we have here is about as definite and realistic as possible. Jesus is, not only is he being emphatic earlier with his ego there, he's being really emphatic with eme and emon, and now ego again. These possessives they're the adjectival possessives, but with the epsilon tacked onto the front, just as if he had tacked an epsilon onto the front of mu here, would have been just extra emphasis. And as a professor of mine is wont to say, when you're talking about the Hebrew language, which is probably what Jesus, or Aramaic or Hebrew, I would think Aramaic, what Jesus is probably speaking here, when you're talking about that language, if you have to ask why something is there, it's for emphasis. And usually we don't see that in the Greek, like whatever is the first word that pops up in a sentence we normally assume is emphatic. But in this case, we've got, again, Jesus being really, really emphatic with ego and eme and emon. And now indicative present with indicative present in a conditional. This is definitely the case. There can be no doubt. Let's take a look at this in its own context now. I myself am not able to do anything from myself. Just as I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous or just, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the one who sent me, or of who sent me. If I myself witness concerning myself, my witness is not true. I didn't really know how to indicate the extreme emphatic nature of how I've read this, I've translated this. So just put exclamation marks at the end of each statement. I could put in other words to show the emphasis as I've done before, but I want to be hesitant about that because this is just added vowel, and it's the conditional. There's not really a good way to do that I can think of at the moment. But thank you very much for joining me, and sorry for going off on so many rabbit trails every time. I hope that you have a very good day and good week. Farewell.